Welcome to The City That Votes, a television series from the Chicago Board of Elections, taking you behind the polling place curtain for a look at how our election system works in the Windy City. I'm Max Bever, Director of Public Information, and your host for the program. This episode, I'm very pleased to introduce you to our new commissioner at the Chicago Board of Elections, Laura Kotelman, who was just sworn in by the Office of the Chief Judge of the Circuit Court of Cook County in late November. A longtime public servant and lawyer, Commissioner Kotelman brings experience in elections, government administration, and community leadership to her role. We are very happy to have a person of her talents join the board. She is also the second Republican woman to be appointed to the board, and for the first time in its 130-year history, the board will be comprised of all women. Commissioner Kotelman, thanks for joining us on The City That Votes.
Thanks, Max. Great to be here.
So to introduce you to our viewers, why don't you tell me a little bit about your background and how you got to the board in the first place?
Sure. So I grew up in Lake County, and I've been in Chicago my entire adult life. I went to undergrad at Lake Forest College, where I majored in political science and Spanish. And then I spent a year in Springfield at the state Senate. And when I came back, after the Senate, I went to law school at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, go Illini. And after law school, I came back to Chicago, and I worked for the Illinois Attorney General. I also have a background, I worked for a law firm for about a decade, and I worked at an insurance trade association, and I've also spent time at some state agencies. My background really is in insurance law, but throughout that time, I also spent a lot of time doing election-related projects on a pro bono basis.
So really a true public servant in a lot of the sense. You've been at a lot of different agencies at the state, at different types of levels. I think it shows just how many of our commissioners come from different backgrounds but are still serving the purpose of, protecting voting and making sure that we have transparent elections. So I do understand that you've also worked down the line on many of our roles at the board for our elections, including an election judge, a hearing officer, many other different types of roles. What sparks your dedication to this work?
Sure. I think it's always been in my DNA. I've been involved since I was a teenager in Lake County, where my dad was a precinct committeeman. So as soon as I was old enough, he made me an election judge, and I would help him deliver literature and sample ballots in our neighborhood. So that's always been something that I've done. And I've never missed an election, even those random township races that had no one, on the ballot, no contested elections.
A good record to have, because I have one missed in my 25 years of voting in this city, and it still bugs me.
Yeah, I bet. So I haven't missed any. Also, as they say, I've worked in the trenches. So I've been there. I've gathered signatures. I've contested signatures. I've notarized petitions. I've rehabilitated signatures. So I've also been on the ballot myself, probably 5 times over the years. So
sometimes that's the best experience.
So I understand the process of filing the candidates have to do. I've also been a poll watcher on a volunteer basis. I've been an on-call lawyer on election day for various campaigns and the party.
I am glad that you brought up poll watching. Still a very important role. It doesn't necessarily get paid like our election judges or our early voting officials, but extremely important, and important for our elections moving forward too. So now that you are at the board, what are some of your specific goals as commissioner?
Sure. So, actually, Max, you mentioned I was a hearing officer.
Oh, yes.
So I want to talk about that for a minute.
Yeah.
So in 2019, the board realized they were going to have an onslaught of challenges to ballot petitions. And so they said, you know what, we need to get some more hearing officers in here. And they wanted to bring in some new blood. So they brought in some more junior lawyers to come in. And I was one of those lawyers. The Republican commissioner at that time said, let's reach out to Republican lawyers because they're going to have a lot fewer conflicts And so I was chosen to be to be one of the hearing officers, and I was assigned probably 3 or 4 hearings, and got those to the board. The board did not overturn any of my findings, and so that was good. And I was invited back to be a hearing officer. It was a really good experience.
Well, especially for a municipal election like 2019, those are some of the most popular, or especially when it comes to objections in the electoral board process. Now, our last episode, when we had our general counsel, Adam Lasker, on, we talked a lot about electoral board and the ins and outs and commissioner's role, so we don't need to repeat ourselves today.
Right.
But you are in an active session with the electoral board right now.
Yep.
It must be pretty interesting to have it on the other side of the aisle.
Yes, for sure.
So let me go back then. You're coming in new, and you've had this experience in elections and throughout your career. What are some of your goals when it comes to the board, especially when it's our role of trying to get people to turn out and make sure that we have transparent elections?
So I'm still pretty new. It's been about a month. Still finding my way around, but I do have a few things that I've been thinking about. One of them is recruiting more Republican election judges. In 2014, well, I'll back up a little bit. When a voter walks into a polling place, they're going to see the poll workers with either a green or a blue name tag, and it states what their party is. And so part of the election process is you have both Republican and Democrat judges there at the polling place. In case something comes up, both parties are represented and the judges can make a decision. So last election in 2014, the city, there was 1,000 vacancies for Republicans. And so I think if I can help get the word out to the party to get more Republican judges, I think that would be good. If there are some things we can do to get the word out to fill those spots, that would be really good.
Yes, this is a very important role of our election judges, that the major parties are represented and we at least have a Republican election judge in each of our precincts. And that can be a challenge, especially I think in a place like Chicago. Also, this gives me the opportunity to say that if you are available on March 17th for our primary, and if you do identify as Republican or pull a Republican ballot for primary elections, we could use your help. So go to chicagooelections.gov to learn more, or if you're ready to apply, go to pollworker.chicagooelections.gov to apply today. Thank you for giving me that moment. Let's talk about a few more of your goals.
Sure. So when you look at the data, we see that active duty military votes at a rate of about 18% less than the general population. So I'd like to do something to get the word out to facilitate our active duty and deployed military from Illinois, from Chicago particularly, to help them get their votes counted and turned in. And we do understand, of course, they face barriers. They're overseas, and so they need to mail their ballot in on time. Registering might be a little difficult. So if we can get the word out either through their family that's back home in Chicago, maybe through the USO or other channels to help them get their votes into their home precinct in Chicago and get those votes counted.
I think that's a very important point because they're very important voters. There are many of our military, members and their families overseas, but also citizens that are living overseas. We can't send a traditional vote by mail ballot overseas. They have to go through this program. However, it's kind of hard for us to communicate with them. As communications director, it's somewhat of a challenge. We can email them, they can come to our website, but they're not hearing as much about the elections, or maybe they don't know where to find their sample ballot. So I think it'd be a great initiative and be happy to work with you moving forward to reach out to our military and our overseas voters in a more coordinated way.
Fantastic. That would be great.
So ultimately, just a quick overview for some of our viewers. You can find this information on our website too, but commissioners, you're appointed to a 3-year term. You're not elected. You're never going to appear on a ballot of any kind. You're appointed by the chief judge of the circuit court to these 3-year terms. And by law, the board membership must include at least one member of each dominant political party. And so that is Democratic or Republican at this time. So I know I've already asked you this question, and a few of what you have already been addressing, especially when it comes to election judges. But what do you see as your role as the, quote unquote, Republican commissioner on the board?
Right. Well, really, my role is no different than the other commissioners. We all share the same oath of office to uphold the Constitution of Illinois and the U.S. Constitution. So I think having the bipartisan board is part and parcel of us being an independent agency that was created 130 years ago to remove it from elected office. So in the counties and in Cook County, the suburbs, it's an elected official, the county clerk, that runs elections. In Chicago, we're unique in that we have this truly independent agency, and that's why there is Republicans and Democrats on the board. So we can really be independent of the elected officials. We're not beholden to them.
I know we're probably biased a little bit, but when it comes to these kind of partisan officials, secretaries of states, clerks across the country, that can get a little bit tricky versus, this independent model that was thought of a long time ago. I think one of my favorite little bits of trivia and lore for the board is that we were created by voter referendum 130 years ago, because that was a question directly to voters that said, hey, should we get the Chicago Board of Elections out of City Hall and have it be its own independent agency? And the voters said yes, and it has been this type of format since then. One of the topics I know that we were discussing when you came in is there's a lot of focus on what we can do to get better voter turnout. And there's never exactly that magic key. Is it the candidates? Is it the campaigns? Is it the year? Is it the type of election? We know a lot of people show up for presidential elections. We know less people show up for primaries, midterms, and our municipal elections. What is some of your thoughts about what we can do to increase turnout, but also with your role as the Republican commissioner?
Well, I think really it's up to the campaigns to motivate, get out to vote and get their voters out. But I think you do a great job as our spokesperson to remind people that elections are coming up and to get out, and vote. But I know in particular we see that Republicans drop off at a rate of about 40%. They don't participate. They'll vote in the presidential, maybe, depending who the candidate is, and then they might turn out in the municipals, but at a 40% less rate. I think to get the word out that elections are for everyone, maybe especially Republicans don't feel like they have a candidate in the race, but it's still important to get out there and have your voice heard and show up on election day.
Yeah, I do wonder about that. Chicago has a long history, has a colorful history, but I also think has a lot of assumptions of, are there any Republican voters in this city? But I do think over the last few election cycles, we've been seeing that change, as well as many other voters change how they're voting. So this is something that I think I've always been appreciative of the Chicago Republican Party, is that they're urging their voters to use vote by mail, urging them to vote in, early voting sites, especially within, traditional places like the northwest side and the southwest side of Chicago. Those are some of our most active early voting sites. So I think, hopefully we can point towards a future where we can see continued voter turnout for everyone within our city and across all neighborhoods. Yeah. So one thing that I think has been exciting and I think got some attention when you were first appointed, but looking at the records, this is the first time in the board's history that the board has been entirely made up of women. There have been many women that have served on the board in the past, but this is really the first time, and on top of some of our new leadership too. What are your feelings on this history-making moment?
I think it's really exciting. I'm excited that I got to be a part of it. So looking forward to doing some things. Maybe we can do something for Women's History Month, which is March, so after the primary.
But I think it's good that we can call attention to a lot of things happening right around the election on March 17th too. So yeah. I think we can get a twofer done, right?
Okay, good, good. So I think that's really exciting, and I think you mentioned I was the second Republican woman. So the first Republican woman served from the 50s to the 80s, so 29 years. So you might be stuck with me for a while. I don't
know. Maybe you can go for the record.
Yeah,
I feel that's an important thing in Chicago for holding a seat for a while, right?
Yeah.
So another fun fact on top of you being the second Republican woman to be appointed is that you're the second person of Generation X to be on the board, which, talking about some of these voter turnout rates and, millennials, we're aging ourselves. I just turned 40 last year, so we're no spring chickens. I think that you'll be seeing a lot more younger commissioners start to just naturally join the board year after year. And I know you and I were looking at some of the data from these age groups and turning out. And while there wasn't anything that immediately popped out, kind of like generation versus generation, what we did see was Generation X on the raw numbers voted just a little bit less in some of our elections versus the boomers and the millennials, but their percentage rate for the number of registered voters they had was still higher than millennials. So I know my age group has some work to do to get our numbers up. We've got a lot more millennial voters in this city. They're just not turning up. But for Generation X, what would be some of your advice about the best way, what would help fire them up and, get ahead of some of these misconceptions about Gen X?
Yeah, I think, it's important to go where they are in terms of like your communication strategy from the board to encourage them when there's elections, where to vote, how to register. So, what social media platforms does Gen X tend to use? Is it YouTube? Is it Facebook? Versus Snapchat or TikTok for younger generations. But going to those places and reminding people there's an election and elections have consequences and that they should absolutely participate.
Well, that's a good point too, and I think that changes as we all get older too. When we're 20, when we're 30, maybe we're not thinking of the issues and the policies that are being debated between our elected officials. When you're getting towards retirement age, when you're using your health care a lot more, when your family's growing or you're getting grandchildren, a lot of those issues start to become a lot more real to you. And I think that, Generation X, but also millennials right behind you are now having to deal with we're not 20 years old anymore, and we probably have to take our voting very seriously.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I think, we have a little bit of time at the end to talk about the upcoming primary election and some of the info, but you had a really fun idea, and I've been trying to keep this show being a little bit more fun than traditional just talking structure. But you came up with, let's do two truths and a lie. So we'll treat this like Tonight Show and everything else. Okay. Would you like to say your three things, and then I have to guess which one is a lie?
Sure. Are you ready?
Yes, I am ready.
Okay. Okay. 1, I love country music. 2, I am a first-generation American. And 3, I don't eat anything I can swim with.
Okay, so this one is a little tough for me. I'm just gonna have to go with my gut because as such a big seafood fan and, living next to Lake Michigan and whenever I visit the East Coast, I can't possibly imagine that anyone would not like seafood. So I'm gonna guess that one's the lie.
No.
Oh no.
It's not.
I've never been very good at predicting these things. Which one's the lie?
Country music.
So you really are bucking the trends.
I can't do it.
Bucking the trends as our Republican commissioner.
Yes, I am.
Well, what's some of the music that you like to listen to?
I love EDM.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
So, John Summit is from Chicagoland.
Yes.
So that's really, and he went to U of I
mm-hmm.
in actuarial science. So, that's insurance, Chicago, Illinois. So I'm a big John Summit fan. And other, Rufus Du Sol, all of it.
Yes, I think you've named all the best, I feel like, headliners in Chicago.
Yeah.
No, but what keeps you away from seafood or I guess that means waterfowl too, duck?
Oh
really?
Yeah, no duck, sorry. Mm-hmm. I know, it's so good for you, but I just didn't grow up eating it and I can't do it. Mm. So yeah.
And you are a first generation
I am.
American then too, yes?
I am. My mom came from Italy. Moved to Chicago when she was very small, 5. Mm-hmm. She went to St. Malachy's for kindergarten. So she came here with her little brother and my grandma and grandpa. Mm-hmm. And so first generation.
Proud generation of immigrants and the history of Chicago. So, well, thanks for sharing a little bit about yourself. We've got just about 5 minutes left. So I want to take some of this opportunity of, we've got this upcoming primary. We'll have a couple more episodes before the March 17th primary. But as a Republican commissioner, I know that this question comes up a lot ahead of our primary elections, and that Illinois is a slightly different state than others, is that you do not have to be have a political party as part of your registration.
Right.
You can pull whatever ballot that you like. So ahead of this next election, just as continued FYI for our viewers and the voters out there, you can choose any ballot that you like, and that can change from election to election. Yep. So I could choose a Democratic ballot one primary election, I could choose a Republican ballot the next election. Yes. But it is not an open primary, so you can't vote for multiple political parties. Is this something that you think will change in Illinois, or has this just kind of been a lot of the ways that things have gone for a while within our city and our state?
Yeah, I think it's been this way for so long. I can't imagine it being different. That's the data that the parties use, so it's not always accurate because sometimes people pull a different party ballot for whatever reason. There's more contests. They're interested in the judge races or whatever, so they might pull a Democrat ballot. So I think the data for the parties isn't always as accurate as it could be in other states where you actually register with your party. But it's just the system we have grown to work with, and I think it's okay. I think giving people a choice is good.
I think, in a way, it's still probably the way that still protects independent status the most. And I think you see that from a lot of the national data that people aren't necessarily voting, all party ballots like they used to, or certainly my parents' generation or my grandparents' generation where it was that straight ticket. There is this desire to really look into these candidates and these. I think in Chicago, we know the Democratic ballot tends to be longer, but I think that there's been increased desire for pulling other party ballots. We have a Libertarian ballot this time around. And just one last reminder, too, if you are on the permanent vote-by-mail roster, that's the only one that we ask you to pick a preferred party. So it's not on your registration, but we do ask you to let us know what ballot you have. So if you have not yet done that, and you're on the permanent roster or would like to join for vote by mail, you can go to chicagooelections.gov, go to our vote by mail page, and then sign up for a ballot that way. I think it's about time to wrap up. Thank you, Commissioner Kotelman. I think it was a great way to have our viewers get to know you a little bit better. And thanks for sharing 2 truths and a lie as well.
You're welcome.
And thank you for joining us for The City That Votes from the Chicago Board of Elections. A couple of last quick things before we close. We're going to start a new segment of the program where we'll answer questions straight from our viewers. So you can send your questions about our election, our processes, historical moments, any other type of data, and more to communications@chicagooelections.gov. And we're going to pull from our ballot box of questions and see if yours gets answered. So that's communications@chicagooelections.gov. Additionally, as mentioned, our vote-by-mail applications are now open for the upcoming election. So do you prefer voting from the comfort of your own home? Go to chicagooelections.gov and apply today, or join our permanent vote-by-mail roster and have your ballots automatically sent ahead of every election. And please follow us on social media. We are at Chicago Election on Facebook, Instagram, X, Blue Sky, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And you can contact me at communications@chicagooelections.gov and let me know what you want to hear about, or send in that question for our ballot box. And until next time, I'm Max Bever, Director of Public Information, and thank you for tuning in.